the nation continued to grow and expand, the people carried with them the same spirit of freedom. It was the guiding principle of their daily lives. They fought and died for it, and naturally they took it into their business enterprises. The free enterprise system grew right along with the people because it was simply the way they wanted to live. Yes, they created free enterprise without even thinking.
This is how Halliburton, an oil logistics multinational company, describes their free market and democracy. However, in the reality of business, practices are not as idealistic as presented in the video, especially for the large companies that report billions of dollars a year in profit. This is how Halliburton won $7 billion in contracts. It's explained by the revolving door of public office. These images are what democracy looked like for the Iraqis when the United States invaded following the terrorist attacks of September 11th, a war that was never voted on and passed by Congress. So what does a century-old oil company have to do with this war, and how does an oil company win an astounding $7 billion in no-bid government contracts? I hope to answer these questions in the following video. To first understand Dick Cheney's importance in this, it is important to keep in mind the revolving door effect between the public and private sectors. This is the phenomena we see a lot when politicians leave office for groups that are cozy with the politics they support. They may even re-enter politics and give preferential treatment to those they worked for while not in office. For example, in 2018, when the FCC was looking to end net neutrality, a policy that would have helped increase the profit of cable companies, it was chaired by Ajit Pai. Before his time at the FCC, he was Associate General Counsel for Verizon. Before that, he worked for the Department of Justice. Just as Pai helped the broadband industry when in government, Cheney seems to have helped his industry, oil, more specifically Halliburton, when in the position of vice president. See, this is nothing new. As we can see, this is very similar to Dick Cheney's association with public service and private work. Cheney and Pai are not the only ones guilty of this. This cycle is indicative of a larger issue. Halliburton's cozy relationship with the Department of Defense is no accident. Now, it's time to understand a little more about Dick Cheney and how he was able to ascend. Before becoming the CEO of Halliburton, and before becoming the vice president, Dick Cheney had a long history in public service, starting most notably as a deputy chief of staff under Gerald Ford. Before that, though, he was a member of the House of Representatives. From there, he dedicated his life to public service, rising all the way to the Secretary of Defense, before deciding to exit the public sector for the private one. He then landed the cushy job at Halliburton, where he was CEO. It is no stretch to say that his appointment was due to his connections in government, and they picked him strategically because of his long commitment to public service. It would not be long after becoming CEO that Dick Cheney was tapped for another role, the vice president to the 2000 Republican presidential nominee George Bush. Dick Cheney had all of the trappings of a classic Republican presidential nominee, but, believe it or not, never wanted to seek the office himself. He became vice president of George Bush under unusual circumstances that gave him more power than the typical vice president who had mostly a ceremonial role. This distinction is important when looking at the way Halliburton was rewarded such ludicrous contracts that range such a wide variety of different fields besides oil, which they are mostly known for. Halliburton and its subsidiary, Kellogg Brown & Root, ran services including helping putting out oil field fires, food distribution, and consulting on using private military in combat. Believe it or not, private military was used for the first time in the Iraqi war after their consultation. A lot of these services could have been put up for public contract bids as a standard procedure for the wide range of government work that is contracted out. However, and very suspiciously, the vice president's former employer won all of these contracts without even needing to compete in the free market. No one to drive competition or incentivize competitive pricing. These services won by Halliburton listed so many they even ran an internment camp for a few months in Iraq as an oil company. This suspicious behavior is important because it helps us better understand how the government operates with unspoken rules and who gets their money. Equally as important is the fact that Bunny Greenhouse, the whistleblower who came to these revelations to Congress, was repeatedly silenced and removed from her role, demoted simply for upholding her public sworn duty. For me personally, it makes me wonder what goes on today within government and the revolving door itself. The lack of transparency and oversight in other bodies such as the Supreme Court is also something to take note of, especially recently as well. There was not a free market or democratic process that propelled Halliburton to win those lucrative contracts. The juxtaposition of the intro video and the reality of how their connections help secure their profit is a concept I would love for you all to contend with. Thank you very much for listening. I would also like to thank the main inspiration for this video, which is a book called Halliburton's Army by Pratap Chatterjee. It is very well thought out and helped me understand better the relationship between Halliburton, its company's role in the war, and also Dick Cheney's role in helping Halliburton win so many of these contracts. It's very interesting to see all of the resources that a multinational company like Halliburton has at its disposal that goes just past oil and energy itself. So definitely interesting and worth checking out. Once again, thank you for listening.